Okay, so welcome to Civil War 2. This is one of the best Civil War games. It is the best grand strategy Civil War game, I think. The only other one that I really enjoy is the Ultimate General Civil War 2, which is very fun. But that's more of a tactical game. This is grand strategy. I'm going to be playing a full campaign from starting in 4th of I'm sorry, not the 4th of the in April 15th, 1861, which is right before Fort Sumter has fallen. I'm going to be playing as the Union. I do have a grasp on some of the complexity of this game. It can get pretty crazy with the amount of depth that is in it, and I'd like to have the advantages that the Union had during the Civil War, which is, manpower, industry, money, all of the things that the Confederacy really lacked. The trade-off is early on you're going to have some crappy generals that you have to deal with, but I don't think I'm going to lose early war, and if I do, it will be very embarrassing and everyone can laugh at me. But I'm going to be able to have all of the advantages that the Union had in the later war. So that's how we're going to play it. I do have a few things that I'm going to be doing that are going to help me keep me organized. The first is I have a checklist which I'll be using every turn, except for the first ones, because the first turns are pretty limited in the amount of units that you have. This checklist is I'll post it somewhere, or I'll show it on the screen. But essentially this checklist is to keep me organized and make sure I don't forget anything. It's very easy to forget what you're doing in this game. I'm also going to be using a system I call campaigns, which I'm going to essentially create campaigns for my forces, and that's going to kind of make my plans more... it adds an element of RP to it, but also it's gonna make sure that I'm maintaining all of my fronts and maintaining sort of an organization and cohesion and planning and all of the things that are necessary to win the war. I tend to when I'm playing this game, I tend to tunnel in on one area and not really think too much of the other areas, just tunnel really hard in on one objective. So I need to kind of keep myself from doing that, and I'm hoping campaigns will do that. So like I said, Fort Sumter has not fallen. PGT Beauregard is sitting outside of it with his force of Carolines, and he is going to take the fort before Lincoln can reinforce it with supplies. I think there was a bit of worry on the southerner side that it wasn't just supplies that were being sent to Fort Sumter, it was also reinforcements. This was really the flashpoint that started the whole war. Lincoln hasn't even arrived yet in DC. He's not inaugurated, so the war really hasn't started yet. But I do have some things that I can do to start off. I can start recruiting some troops. Also, just as a note about this playthrough, I'm going to probably talk a lot about the Civil War. I'm not an expert on it, but I do know some things, and maybe you'll find some of the stories that I know of pretty interesting. But I'm also not going to explain the game too much. I'm going to try and explain what I'm doing, and that'll probably require me explaining the game a bit, but I don't want to bog this game or the playthrough down with a ton of explanation about this game, because it is pretty complex, and it's taken me a while to get to the understanding where I'm at right now with the game, and I don't even think I'm not an expert at it. So I'm sure that people who are experts will find a lot at fault at what I'm doing. But I'm going to start off by building the units that I can at the start of the game. So it's a couple of volunteers, a brigade in New York, some artillery, and some volunteers in Maryland. I'm going to build these guys in Baltimore because there's usually a riot in Baltimore that will destroy the rail line, and if they're trained by then, I can have them fix it. And then I'm going to build these guys, these volunteers in Illinois, and I'm going to build them in Cairo because I like Cairo as a mustering point for my campaign down the Mississippi. It's pretty well positioned for it, and I'm sure historically it was very important strategically. I just don't know much about the history of it. And then I'm going to do some decisions. One of the things I'll be talking about a little bit later is the different departments that I have to defend. Or, I'm sorry, not departments, theaters. So I'll show you the theaters of operation right now. And they're all in different colors, so you can see the differences. And I have a little list where I'll be having my campaigns associated with the different theaters of war. So in this theater there will be campaigns, and in every other theater there will be different campaigns, and I'll explain how I'm going to be organizing those campaigns. But for now, one of the priorities that I'm going to need to do for this theater, which is the far west, I believe, oh no, this is the west, this is the far west, sorry. In the west, it's just open terrain. I mean, it's Kansas, it's the Indian Territory, so the Confederacy has... they're not going to have a ton of units out here, but neither am I. So one of my priorities and one of the things I want to do to make my life a little bit easier out here is develop the terrain so that I can move troops faster. So I'm going to go into my decisions. Oh, no, I'm not. That's my military recruitment. This is my decisions. I'm going to open some trails so I can move troops quicker to the front line. So I'm going to open up some trails. Or I'm going to open up one trail. I'm going to open it up there. And I'm going to make some clearings too, so that I can develop this territory. So I want to defend these forts because forts help me prevent, they prevent raiders from moving too far or moving around your forts. And they're pretty important because if they can just send raiders into your back lines, it's of course going to be a big problem. And I'm going to end the turn. And we'll see what happens. I have a feeling Fort Sumter will fall. It just seems like that is what's going to happen. I've never seen it hold. I'd be really impressed if it did, but I'm pretty sure it's going to fall. And strangely enough, every time I played this game, I've seen Fort Sumter be taken by cavalry. Yep, there it is. It seems that the cavalry has swam out to Fort Sumter because it's on an island right outside of Charleston. They lost over 500 men taking the fort, which I don't think is historical. I'm pretty sure they just bombarded it a bunch and then they surrendered. But this time they decided to do a big cavalry charge and take it out. So interesting strategy. Let's see how it plays out in the long term. But it fell. It has been lost. So Fort Sumter is under Confederate control. Is it? Oh no, Fort Sumter didn't fall. Oh no, it did. But it says it's still under Union control. Oh. By the way, fortifications have started in the capitals. I'm gonna figure out that Fort Sumter thing later. I'm a little embarrassed because I don't know what's going on, so I'm just gonna ignore it and hope it goes away. Fortifications have started in the capitals. Both of the capitals were on the front lines of the war. Like nowadays, you can drive to Richmond from Washington, D.C. really quickly. Well, actually, no, you can't because traffic is terrible driving from Washington, D.C. to Richmond. But it's a matter of miles, which was pretty unique to the Civil War. There's not a ton of wars that I can think of where the capitals were within spitting distance of each other. So both of these capitals became heavily fortified areas. I mean, by the end of the war, Washington, D.C. was probably the most heavily fortified city in the whole world. Same with Richmond, maybe. And there were a ton of battles fought outside of the fortifications of Richmond when Grant was really starting to, really just beat down the Confederacy. No corps before 1862. As you can see, read here. This is to represent the historical, organizational difficulties and military thinking, mentality, and red tape. Corps are really useful. They help you organize your troops and make offensives easier, and they also have a bunch of game benefits too that are important. But I don't get any for a whole year, so it's going to be a little rough getting any offensives off in 1861, but we're going to try our best. Fort Sumter has been bombarded. According to this event, it has surrendered. So, but according to the map, I still have it. So I'm not really sure what's going on. And it says I lost that battle, right? Like, we all saw that. We have lost the battle. Yeah, I don't get it. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll try and take it again. Karl Schutz has raised German troops. Ooh, you might have heard a noise behind me. That was a bunny being annoying. So ignore that if you hear it again, or if you hear any creaking from my chair, because it's old. Anyway, back to the game. Karl Schutz has raised some German troops in New York. He was an active campaigner against slavery, and on the outbreak joined forces of the Union Army. He helped recruit German immigrants living in New York before being asked to... eventually he left. But immigrants were a huge part of the Civil War. There were a lot of regiments and divisions and brigades that were all... they were based on nationality. There's the famous Irish Brigade. Well, I think there was two famous oh my god, I can't speak. There was two famous Irish brigades. There was one on the Confederacy side and one on the Union side, and I'm pretty sure they actually encountered each other at Fredericksburg, which was brutal, and I think the Union really didn't enjoy that battle. But Schutz has raised his cavalry regiment, and I'm going to send them to Fredericktown, Maryland, because this area is really annoying, and I want to prevent raiders from using this area, which is the it's the Shenandoah Valley. It's the Shenandoah Valley, this kind of area right here. So you've got these mountains here, which are the Appalachians, and here is a valley between this other mountain range, which I don't know the name of, but this area is one of the most contested during the Civil War. This is where Stonewall Jackson really kind of shone. He had this brilliant campaign in the Shenandoah Valley where he really embarrassed the Union. So I'm going to send Schutz down there, and hopefully his cavalry will be able to help hold that up. It's going to take him 50 days by rail, so that's pretty good. I've got some new generals here. They're not really good, so I'll take a look at Hamilton. He's only got one offensive, one defensive. I'm pretty sure by comparison, like, Lee's got like 5s and 6s, and so he's not great. He is a rank 2, which means when I get corps, he could lead one. But for now, I'm going to combine these generals, and I can use these guys for divisions, for leading troops, and things like that. Let's keep going through these events. Lincoln has called for volunteers. He is going to raise a 100,000 man army, he asked governors of the loyal states for 75,000 militiamen to serve for 3 months. This was a big mistake. Everyone thought the war was going to be over in 3 months, and when it didn't end in 3 months, a lot of people, all of these 75k militiamen were like, "Hey, our 3 months are done. Can we go home now?" And Lincoln was like, "Well, about that, the war didn't end, so no." And that was a bit of a problem, but Lincoln, being Lincoln, was able to politic his way out of it because he is one of the smartest people who has ever been the president, so I think we're fine. The blockade has started. The blockade of the Confederacy was really important. It's not much of a blockade yet because I don't have a ton of ships, but by the end of the war, the Union Navy was one of the largest in the world, probably one of the most powerful too, but right now it's pretty small. Here's that riot that I was talking about in Baltimore. Maryland in general was very sympathized with the South a lot. It was a slave state, so there was riots in Baltimore because of the start of the Civil War, and they weren't happy that they were still a part of the Union. So much so that Union ended up arresting a bunch of people and suspending habeas corpus, which was innocent until proven guilty, I think, or everyone has a right to trial, something along those lines. He arrested a bunch of people and a lot of prominent politicians in Maryland, like state senators and mayors, and I think maybe even the governor. I don't know. It's really interesting. Look it up, because a lot of people kind of forget about that. Virginia has seceded. I'm pretty sure one of the reasons, other than slavery, obviously, why this seceded is that they didn't want Union troops marching through their territory, because at this point the South was still seceding. I don't think North Carolina has seceded yet, but they're gonna. Virginia was pretty not okay with Union troops moving through them, and they were really concerned about it. They had the John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, and there was a lot of worry about slave revolts in Virginia, so much so that they founded they kind of professionalized their militia. That's why, part of the reason why Virginia has had such a fearsome reputation during the Civil War is they were kind of ready for it. Anyway, I've got some money and some guys, but I can't really recruit anything more. Can I not recruit any ships? Okay, can't recruit any ships, which is unfortunate. I'd like to, because I'd like to get that started as soon as possible. I'm going to get some supply, though, and I'm going to build them. I'm going to build a bunch of supply here because, I kind of wish I put one in St. Louis. It's okay, I can move it. But it's going to be harder for me to have good supply lines here, so it'll be important for me to have some supply trains ready to go. I'm going to see if there's any decisions I can make that'll help me out. I can build oh, no, I can't. Can't build defensive works. I'm going to keep developing territory out here because it's important. I think I want to develop territory here because I really do want to take this city, or town, the Jefferson and Rolla, very early on. These are two of my early objectives. And then I'm going to keep developing territory out here because I want to be able to move troops easier out here. I'm not actually certain that developing territory helps with that, but I'm hoping that it does. But I do want to open more trails because trails, and I'm out of money, but that's okay. I'm going to just quickly check if there's any stuff I want to do. I could move the capital to New York City and basically say that I think that I'm losing the war really badly. That's a bad idea. I lose a lot of victory points, and I don't want to do that yet. Oh, not bad. Nothing in the interior. I'm going to declare the blockade. This is kind of a interesting little problem that Lincoln had for himself. He blockaded the Confederacy, but the rules of war, well, they were kind of the respected rules of war internationally, was that you can only blockade another nation. You can't really blockade a rebelling territory. At least that's how Europe considered it. So by declaring a blockade, Lincoln was sort of acknowledging that the Confederacy was its own country, and Great Britain and France kind of called him out on that a little bit, and Lincoln was like, nope, I'm just going to do it, and it's not its own country. I still don't recognize it. And that was sort of the end of it, but it was a little bit, well, I mean, it was a bit of a problem, at least initially, and a little political point. Ooh, I don't actually want to move these guys out of Washington, D.C. I will, I do want to, oh, this guy's pretty good. Jay Shields is good at guarding a fort, so I'm going to find a fort for him eventually to go hold. I might have him hold Alexandria, or I'm hoping to eventually take Manassas and make it a fort, but we'll decide where to send him. But I do want to send some guys out west. I'm going to send some people with seniority. Seniority is important because if you promote people or give people with commands who have lower seniority, if people with lower seniority are promoted, you lose national morale. So I don't want to do that. And our national morale is important to a lot of things. It's basically a general bluff, not general bruff, general buff to what you're doing. But I'm going to send these 5 dudes out west, and I'm going to send them to St. Louis, which is going to eventually be the headquarters, more or less, for my west campaign, and this will be my mustering ground. Alright, it's kind of it. I don't think I got a ton enough to do, so we're going to end this turn and get into this. I believe the armies are going to spawn now, so we're going to start getting going once the turn ends. Oh, and each turn is about 2 weeks, so if you're wondering how much time is passing, it's 2 weeks. So, okay. So, oh, Union ships attempt to, Well, Fort Sumter is definitely still around, and it's been reinforced. So, that's really interesting. I was talking about how Fort Sumter never falls. I've never seen it fall, and it is still there. So that's pretty awesome. And I don't see any Confederate forces in sight. Fort Sumter is going to be important now because I might use it as a base to attack Charleston. And Charleston is very important to the Confederacy. I believe it's their biggest port other than New Orleans. So that's pretty impressive. Arkansas has seceded. That's unfortunate. They have made the wrong choice. They should have stayed. Tennessee has also seceded. I also think that was the wrong choice. How dare they? Kentucky hasn't seceded because, and I don't think they will. I might eat those words later, but as you can see, it says 50% Unionist and 50% Confederacy loyalty. Kentucky declared neutrality during the war, and that pretty much held solid until their neutrality was violated by a Confederate general by the name of Pope. And I think he might have actually been a bishop or something before the war. It's a very strange guy. He thought that by invading Kentucky, he would be able to get them to join the Confederacy, but it really only made them go for the Union because their neutrality had been violated, and that was really bad for the Confederacy because it was a whole new stretch of territory that they had to now defend, and they just didn't have the men to defend all this territory. I'm not going to have a lot of men to defend this territory, if I'm honest, at least to start off with. Eventually, I'll just be able to poop out soldiers, but for now, I don't have that much. And this territory's really crappy. Not to hate on Kentucky or anything, but, like, it's just a bunch of hills, and it's not easy to march through, and there's not a ton of industry there, so I don't really want to fight over this, so I don't have any intention of breaking that neutrality myself. Let's see if I can get Banks to... Nope, I can't. Are these guys ready to go? I'm going to have Banks stay in Baltimore because he's got this trait called Recruiting Officer, and I can muster new conscripts on a regular basis in levels in cities level 5+. Is Baltimore a good city for that, actually? Yeah, it's a size 12. So I'm going to have him recruiting in Baltimore and try and build up an army. I do want to send Banks to Frederick, and I want to hold this area in across from Harper's Ferry because I want to hold this river, which is the Potomac? No. It is the Potomac. Of course, the Potomac is really important, so I want to hold that, at least in this northern area, the Shenandoah Valley. So you can see here that the armies have spawned. This is Johnston. I don't remember his first name, but that's Johnston. There was two Johnstons, this guy and Albert Sidney Johnston, and he's the guy who dies at Shiloh. But and he was Jefferson Davis's favorite general, Albert Sidney Johnston. He kind of had like he was like a fanboy for Albert Sidney Johnston. Johnson was actually not this one, the other one was a really interesting guy and really smart. Everyone kind of thought he was going to be the big general of the Confederacy. He was called, I think, the general of the Four Republics because he fought for the Confederacy, he fought for the Union, he fought for Texas, and I think he also